The chandeliers dripped light, a cold, crystalline rain that never touched the ground. It pooled on the polished marble floor, shimmered on the rims of 100 champagne flutes, and caught in the diamonds that glittered at the throats and wrists of women who moved like swans on a frozen lake. I stood beside my son, Ethan, a ghost in a rented tuxedo that felt like a cardboard prison. The fabric was stiff against my neck, a constant reminder that I did not belong here, in this world of his, this grand ballroom rented for a night to celebrate a charity I'd never heard of. My world was one of worn flannel and the stubborn grease that lived under your fingernails, a world of honest sweat and the satisfying ache of a day's hard labor. This place, with its hushed murmurs and the clinking of silver on porcelain, felt as foreign as the surface of the moon. My hands, thick and callous from a lifetime of laying pipe and hoisting steel, felt like clumsy mallets in this delicate ecosystem. I kept them jammed in my pockets, afraid they might accidentally shatter something priceless. My daughter-in-law, Serena, was holding court across the room. She was the architect of all this, the curator of their perfect life. She moved with a practiced grace, her laughter a precise, musical note designed to charm. Ethan watched her with a kind of desperate adoration, his face a mask of polished success. He had my height, but none of my heft. His body was sculpted in a gym, not forged on a construction site. He turned to me, his smile a little too bright under the relentless chandeliers. A man with a microphone was making his way through the crowd, a roving reporter for some society webcast, and Ethan's eyes lit up with opportunity. He draped a heavy arm over my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look affectionate but felt like an anchor. "And this," Ethan announced, his voice booming with a manufactured warmth as the camera swung toward us, "is my old man, The Rock. The man who taught me everything I know about hard work." The reporter, a young man with a hungry smile, aimed the microphone at Ethan. "Ethan, it's wonderful what your foundation is doing for underprivileged families. It's clear that generosity runs in your family." Ethan's grip on my shoulder tightened. "It's the least we can do," he said, his gaze sweeping the room as if he were a king surveying his domain. "My father, he sacrificed everything for me. Worked 2 jobs, never took a day off. Now, it's my turn to take care of him. It's my greatest pleasure to make sure he wants for nothing," the reporter nodded, scribbling on a small pad. A truly inspiring story. Then Ethan delivered the line, the one that would detonate the quiet foundations of my world. He looked directly into the camera, his expression a perfect blend of humility and pride. "It's why the $20,000 monthly allowance I give him is the best money I've ever spent. He deserves that and so much more." The words hung in the air, glittering and false like the light from the chandeliers. $20,000 a month. The sum was so fantastical, so utterly disconnected from my reality, that for a moment I felt a dizzying sense of detachment, as if you were talking about a different man entirely. I saw my life flash before my eyes. The cramped one-bedroom apartment over the laundromat, the hum of the dryers a constant lullaby. The Social Security check that barely covered the rent and the utilities. The weekly budget that treated a fresh steak like a king's ransom. The worn armchair where I read the library's books, the stuffing peeking out from a tear in the arm. I managed to keep my face a stony blank, a skill learned over 67 years of swallowing pride and enduring hardship. I just nodded, a slow, mechanical dip of my head, playing the part of the grateful, silent father. The reporter smiled, satisfied, and moved on to his next subject. Ethan gave my shoulder a final, proprietary squeeze before drifting back toward his wife. But across the room, I saw Serena. She had been watching the interview, a placid smile on her face. But when Ethan said the words, $20,000 monthly allowance, her smile didn't just vanish. It froze. It shattered into a million tiny, invisible pieces, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes, which had been sweeping the room with casual command, were now fixed on Ethan, wide and dark with a dawning horror. The blood drained from her face, leaving her painted lips a stark, crimson gash against her pallid skin. She stood perfectly still for a second that stretched into an eternity, a statue of ice in the warm, crowded room. It was not the look of a woman hearing a sweet, embellished lie. It was the look of a co-conspirator whose partner had just gone catastrophically off-script in front of the whole world. In that frozen moment, I understood. The lie wasn't for me. It wasn't even for the reporter. It was for someone else, for some larger game they were playing. And the $20,000, that absurd, impossible number, was a number she had never heard before. Ethan had invented it on the spot, a flourish of performative generosity that had just blown a hole in whatever fragile facade they had so carefully constructed. The weight of his lies settled on me, heavier than any bag of concrete I had ever carried. I was no longer a father. I was a prop. The drive home was a blur of streetlights smearing across the bus window. The rented tuxedo felt even more constricting now, choking me with the scent of another man's life. Back in my apartment, the familiar smell of old paper and dust was a comfort. I peeled off the stiff jacket and starched shirt and let them fall to the floor, a discarded costume. I stood in my worn t-shirt and trousers in the center of my small living room, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. The lie echoed in the quiet space. $20,000 a month. I walked to the kitchen, opened a can of beans, and heated them on the stove. I ate them standing up, straight from the pot, the way I often did. It was a meal that cost less than $1. I looked around at my kingdom. The cracked linoleum floor, the chipped Formica countertop, the calendar from the local hardware store, still showing a picture of a snow-covered barn from last January because I hadn't bothered to turn the page. This was my reality. It was a small life, a quiet one, but it was mine. It was an honest life, built on the principle that you earn what you have and you don't pretend to be something you're not. My son had taken that life, my story, and he had twisted it into a grotesque caricature for public consumption. He hadn't just lied about money. He had erased me. He had erased the years of overtime, the patched work boots, the meals I'd skipped so he could have new shoes for school. He had replaced the truth of my sacrifice with a gaudy, insulting price tag. I sank into my armchair, the one with the torn fabric, and the springs groaned in protest. I thought back to when Ethan was a boy. I remembered holding his small hand, its softness a stark contrast to my own rough palm, as we walked to the park. I remember the pride I felt when he brought home a report card full of A's, a ticket to a world I could never enter. I had pushed him, telling him that his mind was his greatest tool, that he could build a life with it that I could only dream of. I had worked until my back screamed and my hands bled so that he would never have to. I believed I was building a bridge for him, a bridge out of our working-class neighborhood and into a future of comfort and security. I had watched from the shore as he crossed it, and I had been proud. But I never imagined he would get to the other side and then set the bridge on fire so no one could see where he came from. The betrayal was a physical thing, a cold, heavy stone in my gut. It wasn't just the lie itself, but the casual, effortless way he had delivered it. As if my life, my actual, breathing life, was just a raw material for him to shape into whatever story best served his ambition. And Serena's face, that fleeting mask of horror, told me there was more to this than just a son's foolish boast. There was a deeper rot, a structural weakness in the grand edifice they had built, and Ethan had just hammered a crack right through the middle of it. For 2 days, I sat in my apartment, the world outside muted and distant. The television flickered without sound. The phone rang, and I let it. I knew it would be Ethan or Serena, calling to manage the fallout, to smooth over the lie, to perhaps even scold me for not playing my part with more enthusiasm. But I did not want to hear their voices. I needed the silence to think. The initial shock, the deep, wounding pain, began to slowly cool and harden into something else. It became a quiet, cold resolve. I had spent my life being a foundation for others, a silent support structure that was meant to be felt but not seen. I had accepted my invisibility as a necessary part of my son's ascent. But he had not just made me invisible. He had tried to paint over me, to replace my reality with a fiction of his own making. That was an act of annihilation, and I would not be annihilated. I would not be a ghost in my own life. I realized that the question was no longer why he had lied. The question was what the lie was meant to hide. Serena's reaction was the key. Her panic was not about my feelings. It was about exposure. The lie Ethan told was dangerous to them, and I needed to understand why. That was it. That was the moment the old man, the passive, stoic father, died in that worn-out armchair. I would not be a victim. I would become a strategist. I would find the truth. The truth was a tool, just like a hammer or a wrench. And for the first time in a long time, I had a job to do. My first move was to call Maria. She had been a housekeeper at Ethan and Serena's sprawling mansion for 5 years. I had met her a few times on the rare occasions I was invited over, usually for carefully staged holiday photos. She was a quiet woman from El Salvador, with kind, observant eyes that missed nothing. We had connected over the shared language of hard work. I had helped her fix a squeaky wheel on her cleaning cart once, and she had always treated me with a warmth and respect that was absent from my own family's interactions. I found her number on a piece of paper in my wallet, given to me years ago in case of emergency. I suppose this qualified. I met her at a small coffee shop downtown, a neutral space far from the manicured lawns of their neighborhood. She looked worried, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea. I didn't waste time. I told her what happened at the gala, about the lie, and about Serena's frozen expression. I watched her face carefully as I spoke. She listened, her brow furrowed in concentration. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, staring into her cup. "They are scared, Mr. Arthur," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Always scared. The house is big, but the walls are thin. I hear things," she told me, about the hushed, frantic phone call Serena would take in her office, the door not quite closed. She spoke of stacks of letters with angry red, past-due stamps that would arrive and then quickly disappear. She mentioned a man with a hard face who had come to the door a few months ago, a man Serena had met on the porch, her voice low and pleading. Maria saw him slip Serena a thick envelope, and saw Serena hand him back a small, heavy-looking canvas bag. It was all circumstantial, fragments of a puzzle, but it confirmed my gut feeling. The gleaming palace my son and daughter-in-law had built was a house of cards, trembling on the verge of collapse. "Serena keeps everything in her office," Maria said. "She locks it, but the key is simple. It is on the ring with the key for the wine cellar. She trusts me to go into the cellar." My heart began to beat a little faster. This was it. A path was opening. I asked Maria if she would be willing to help me. I explained that I wasn't trying to destroy my son, but to understand the truth of the mess he was in. I wanted to find the facts that would prove the lie and expose the reason for it. I saw the hesitation in her eyes. She was risking her job, her livelihood. I reached across the table and put my calloused hand over her small, work-worn one. "Maria," I said softly, "I have spent my whole life building things. Things that are meant to last. What they have built is a lie, and it's going to hurt a lot of people when it falls. We just need to see the blueprints." She looked at me, her dark eyes searching my face. Then she gave a single, firm nod. A week later, Maria called. Ethan and Serena were flying to Aspen for a long weekend, a trip hastily planned after the gala, no doubt to project an image of carefree stability. The house would be empty. She told me to come on Saturday afternoon, during her regular cleaning shift. Walking up the stone path to their front door felt like stepping onto an enemy shore. The house was an imposing monument of glass and stone, designed to intimidate. Maria let me in, her face pale and tense. She led me upstairs to Serena's office. The room was immaculate, cold, and impersonal, like a magazine photo. A large mahogany desk stood before a wall of glass that overlooked a perfectly manicured garden. It was the desk of commander, a general. Maria handed me the key. It slid into the lock with a soft click. The air inside the desk drawers was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and deceit. The top drawers held nothing but stationery and pens. But in the bottom right drawer, tucked beneath a stack of glossy foundation brochures, was a leather-bound ledger. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. It wasn't a personal diary. It was a meticulous record of payments. Names I didn't recognize were listed next to staggering sums of money, labeled as consulting fees or discretionary grants, but these weren't charity payments. The ledger was cross-referenced with a second, smaller book hidden in the back of the same drawer. This one detailed a series of loans from individuals, not banks. The interest rates were astronomical. The man with the hard face was in there, his name listed next to a principal that made my stomach clench. They were drowning in private debt to very dangerous people. The charity, their grand public gesture, was a front. A mechanism to bring in donations that were being funneled out to service their debts and maintain their lavish lifestyle. And then I found it. A file folder with my name on it. Inside, there were no records of any $20,000 payments. Instead, there were drafts of letters to a wealthy donor, an elderly widow who was a patron of the arts. The letters, written in Serena's elegant script, were full of heart-wrenching stories about her husband's dear old father, me. They painted a picture of a proud, ailing man who refused to accept charity directly, but for whom they were setting up a special discretionary fund. They were using my good name, my reputation for quiet dignity, as bait to solicit a massive donation. Ethan's lie at the gala wasn't just a spontaneous boast. It was a calculated performance for the benefit of that donor, who I now remembered seeing in the crowd, watching the interview with a teary, benevolent smile. My son hadn't just erased me. He had sold my integrity. I took out my old phone and, with shaking hands, I photographed every single page of both ledgers and the contents of my file. The flash was a small, silent explosion in the quiet room, each one a nail being hammered into their coffin of lies. Maria stood by the door, a silent sentinel. When I was done, I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. As I walked out of that house, the cold winter air felt clean and sharp in my lungs. I was no longer just a father seeking to understand. I was a man with evidence. My next stop was Frank's office. Frank and I had grown up together in the old neighborhood. He'd been a wiry, scrappy kid who fought his way through night school to become a lawyer. He never moved to a fancy downtown office, preferring a small, cluttered space above a bakery that always smelled of fresh bread. He was the only person I knew who could look at my story and see the man, not the caricature. I laid it all out for him on his messy desk. The story of the gala, the lie, Maria's observations, and the dozens of blurry but legible photos on my phone. He listened without interruption, his face growing grimmer with each detail. He swiveled in his creaky chair and looked out the window for a long time. "Artie," he said, finally turning back to me, his voice rough with emotion. "This is uglier than a junkyard dog. This isn't just family drama. This is fraud. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy. They've been using this charity as a personal piggy bank and using your good name to fill it up." He explained the legal mechanics, the way prosecutors would view the evidence. The ledgers were the key, the proof of a systematic scheme to defraud donors. My story, my testimony, would be the emotional heart of the case. It would make it real for a jury. "What do you want to do, Artie?" he asked, his eyes holding mine. "We can take this to the district attorney. They'll launch a full investigation. It will be public, it will be messy, and it will destroy your son." I thought about Ethan as a little boy, his face full of trust as he put his hand in mine. I had wanted to build him a better world, and in a way I had. I had given him the tools to escape. But he had used those tools to build a prison of lies, and now he was trapped inside it with Serena. Did I want to destroy him? No, I wanted to save him. But you can't save a man by helping him patch the cracks in a collapsing building. Sometimes you have to tear the whole rotten structure down to the foundation and start over. "There's another event," I said, my voice steady. "The New Year's Eve Gala. It's their biggest fundraiser of the year. The widow, the one they're targeting, is supposed to be the guest of honor." Frank leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across his face. He understood immediately. "A public reckoning," he murmured. "You want to confront them in the same arena where they humiliated you." It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about turning the artificial light of their world into the harsh, cleansing light of the truth. It was the only way to make them see, to make everyone see. We spent the next few weeks preparing. Frank drafted legal notices and affidavits. He had a forensic accountant analyze the photos of the ledgers, creating a clear, damning report on the flow of money. We found the names of other small donors who had been duped by their story. We were building a case, brick by solid brick. I felt like I was back on a job site, only this time I wasn't building with steel and concrete. I was building with facts. A few days before the New Year's Gala, my son called. It was the first time I'd heard from him since that night. His voice was strained, a thin veneer of casualness over a thick layer of anxiety. "Dad, hey, haven't heard from you. Just want to check in, see how you're doing." I kept my voice level. "I'm doing just fine, Ethan." There was a pause. "Look, about that night, I might have gotten a little carried away. You know how it is, the cameras, the pressure. I just wanted everyone to know how much you mean to me." It was a pathetic, self-serving apology that wasn't an apology at all. "Is that what you call it?" I asked, my voice cold. "Getting carried away?" He became defensive. "Dad, you don't understand the kind of world I live in. Sometimes you have to embellish things. It's just how the game is played." Then came the veiled threat, delivered with a sigh of paternalistic concern, likely coached by Serena. "You know, Dad, you've seemed a little confused lately. Maybe all this excitement is too much for you at your age. We're worried about you." I felt a flash of white-hot anger, but I pushed it down. I had a plan. Losing my temper was not part of it. "I've never been clearer in my life, son," I said. "And I'll see you at the gala on New Year's Eve." I wouldn't miss it for the world. I hung up the phone before he could reply. The line had been drawn. The New Year's Eve gala was even more opulent than the first. The air crackled with forced merriment and the desperate energy of the wealthy at play. This time, I didn't wear a rented tuxedo. I wore my own suit, the one I'd bought 20 years ago for my wife's funeral. It was simple, dark wool, and it fit me like a second skin. It was a uniform of quiet dignity, of a life lived, not performed. I saw Ethan and Serena near the stage, schmoozing with the elderly widow, Mrs. Delacourt. She was beaming at them, her checkbook no doubt ready. Frank was there, standing near the back, looking like an undertaker at a wedding. He gave me a subtle nod. I waited until the main presentation began. Ethan took the stage, the spotlight finding him, bathing him in its artificial glow. He started his speech, his voice smooth and practiced, talking about family values and the importance of caring for our elders. He gestured toward me, where I stood at a table near the front. "My own father is here tonight," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A man of simple means, but with a heart of gold. And as I said before, it is my life's greatest honor to provide for him, to make his golden years truly golden." That was my cue. I stood up and walked calmly toward the stage. A security guard moved to intercept me, but I just looked at him, and he hesitated. My age, my simple suit, my calm demeanor. I was not a threat. I was just a father. I walked up the small set of stairs and stood beside my son at the podium. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at me, his face a mixture of panic and fury. Serena, standing in the wings, looked like she was about to faint. I turned to the microphone. "My name is Arthur Coleman," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying through the cavernous room. "My son is right about one thing. I'm a man of simple means. I live in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. My sole income is a Social Security check for $957 a month." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. "My son speaks of a $20,000 monthly allowance. It is a beautiful story. The only problem is that it isn't true. I have never received a single dollar from my son or his wife. Not 1 inch." I paused, letting the words sink in. I looked at Mrs. Delacourt, whose benevolent smile had been replaced by a look of sharp, horrified confusion. "But my name has been very useful to them," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "They have used my story, a story of a poor, proud father, to solicit funds for their foundation. Funds that, according to their own secret ledgers, are not used to help the underprivileged, but to pay off loan sharks and finance a lifestyle they cannot afford." From the back of the room, Frank moved forward, handing a thick folio to Mrs. Delacourt's personal assistant. "The evidence of this fraud is all in there," I said, my voice ringing with the clarity of undeniable truth. "Photographs of their books, a detailed accounting of their scheme." I turned to my son. The spotlight was still on him, but it no longer looked flattering. It was a harsh interrogator's lamp, exposing every line of fear and guilt on his face. "You didn't just lie about money, Ethan," I said, my voice dropping, now speaking just to him, though the whole world was listening. "You tried to erase my life. You tried to trade my dignity for a donation. You took my sacrifices, the honest sweat of my entire life, and you turned it into a marketing slogan, I looked out at the sea of stunned faces. "I am not a prop," I said, my voice resonating with a lifetime of unspoken worth. "My life is not a story for you to sell." And with that, I turned and walked off the stage. The silence that followed was absolute, a deafening void where the applause was supposed to be. Then, a single person began to clap. It was Mrs. Delacourt. She stood up, her face a mask of cold fury directed at Ethan and Serena, and she applauded me. Slowly, others joined in, a rising tide of sound that was not for a charity, but for the simple, unvarnished truth. I had become visible. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The district attorney's office, spurred on by Frank and Mrs. Delacourt's high-powered legal team, launched a full-scale investigation. The gala became a crime scene. The ledgers were seized, the accounts frozen. Ethan and Serena were indicted by a grand jury within a month. The trial was a quiet, somber affair. I sat in the front row every day, a silent witness. I watched as the prosecutors laid out the whole sordid story, brick by damning brick, using the evidence Maria had helped me find and the financial report Frank's accountant had prepared. When I took the stand, I didn't speak with anger. I simply told the truth. I told them about my life, about the pride I took in my work, about the sacrifices I had made for my son. I told them about the night of the first gala and the weight of the lie. I looked at Ethan as I spoke. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the little boy he used to be, his face pale and lost. He couldn't meet my eyes. They were both found guilty. Serena, as the architect of the scheme, received a sentence of 7 years. Ethan, for his role, received 5. The judge was not lenient. He spoke of a profound betrayal of public trust and, looking directly at me, a sickening betrayal of filial duty. I didn't visit Ethan in prison for the first year. I needed time. The quiet of my apartment felt different now. It was no longer the silence of invisibility, but the silence of peace. Frank had helped me establish a small fund with some of the restitution money, a real one this time. We worked with community centers to provide small, no-questions-asked grants to elderly people who found themselves in financial trouble, people who were too proud to ask for help. It was my name on it, but it was built on a foundation of truth. Maria came to work for me, helping me manage the paperwork. Her courage had been rewarded. One day, I received a letter, the handwriting shaky and unfamiliar. It was from Ethan. It wasn't an excuse or a justification. It was just a few lines. "Dad," it read, "I am sorry. I lost my way. I hope one day you can forgive me for destroying the bridge you built for me." I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. The bridge wasn't destroyed. It was just damaged. And I was a builder. It was what I had always been. I knew that my final job would be to see if, after everything, that bridge could be repaired. The work would be hard, and the foundation would need to be reset in truth, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt ready for the wait. I had found my voice, I had reclaimed my story, and I knew, with the certainty of a man who has tested his own strength, that I could build anything.